personal vendetta over anyone else that was not on his side. And to me, that's very dangerous.
We have to find somebody that'll work with us that has dealt.
Alright, what's up and good evening everyone, how y'all doing? Now today I'm going to talk about something that is quite controversial. Now not because I had anything to do with it, but as you all know, 50 Cent just released and launched a 4-part series on Netflix about Sean Combs' The Reckoning almost a week ago, right? And since then there has been so much talking points, controversies, and
Sean Combs
unlocking and digesting and thinking and God knows what about what had transpired through this 4-part episode, right? Now, I'm not going to go into the premise of the story, as you probably should know by now, right? But it's a very difficult, very complex, and very somewhat disturbing topic for one, but for two, the way of how the mastery of how 50 produced this series was also just as amazing, right? Now, rather than me going into deep diving on every aspect of the series, I'm just going to lay out 10 talking points that I got from what I saw last week, right? Now, maybe let's just say 9 talking points, because firstly, I want to talk a little bit more about my background in terms of listening to hip hop for 30, God knows how many motherfucking years, of what my take on listening to the West Coast and the East Coast. So, when I first got introduced into hip hop music, right, I was more into the Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, the West Coast sound, right? And eventually, obviously, Pac as well. So I was always leaning towards the sound of West Coast in the early to mid 90s. Now, obviously, the vibe was different, and it's chillin' and G-Funk and everything, right? So East Coast was always sounding a little bit more serious and, the New York style thing. So I only started listening to Nas and all those guys, probably Junior Mafia, a little after my experience with the West Coast sound, right? So Diddy or Puffy back in those days was around what, 92, 93, and then plus the fact that I was living in Australia, right? So we were never seeing this whole hip hop culture as a mainstream thing. So, and when you think about it, the early 90s, the internet wasn't even here, right? So programs such as Rage that you could actually get to watch hours of MTV in Australia, right? And radio airplay, hardly any hip hop, right? Unless they reach like the top 20 or top 40. But anyway, I digress. Now, even back in those days, my point one is that my own knowledge was, of course, I also bought his No Way Out and all those albums as well too, right? But I was never really that into it. I mean, of course, Biggie being a legend, there was no way that I would not have listened to him, right? However, it was just really, 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 really strange. I always felt there was something a little off from, I was just starting to get to listen to hip hop, right? So didn't think too much of it at all. I mean, and I suppose most people weren't really thinking that much back then as well too, right? I'm guessing. Right, but the thing is, but it's hard to talk. It's really, and then I mean, I think the first signs of any weirdness for me, again coming in from a listener, culture, a fan perspective, it was when you hear about Maze leaving Bad Boys in 1999, right? And then I was like, okay, something fishy going on, something that why would a rapper suddenly stop rapping? And he was in his prime, he wasn't that old. It was like, I think it was like mid-20 or something, Maze. So that kind of probably hit me. Maybe there's something that bad boys are bad boys, right? But anyway, that was my point one. The second point, which pretty much the whole episode 2, right? The Pac and Biggie situation. Now, there was so much footage on how, you know, Biggie and Pac were friends. They were, you know, hanging out and doing stuff, you know, together and supporting each other. Well, more so Pac supporting Biggie, as, you know, Pac's been out for, you know, doing music for a few years, right? But then the disturbing fact about Puff getting jealous of that friendship, it was like looking through the footage that was being transpired on episode 2, it was more sad than disturbing, because, or if you have a, you know, someone like Biggie who is actually befriending someone on the other side of the coast, which is just as prominent, say Tupac, then why would you feel jealous about that? You know, I mean, and when you think about it, back then there weren't as many rappers as we have nowadays, right? So, you know, if there's anything, friendly competition, fine, but then to escalate it to how it ended up in the end, obviously the whole Death Row Street Night thing, and then everything else that happened behind the scene as well, made it just really hard to watch of how the story was unfolding, right? And to me, so that was tough to watch. And the fact that, you know, the story, you know, the whole investigations, you know, what, 30 years now, and there was still no real conclusion, you know, and to me, that's also disturbing, right? Third point, that tribute Puff did when Biggie passed away, right? The one where Sting was there, Faith was there, and we learned from the series that, you know, Faith wasn't really into it prior, right? But they ended up performing anyway. Now, I remember watching that parade live, or whenever that came out back in '97, right? Why the fuck would you dance around like that when you're doing a tribute to your mates? You know what I'm saying? Again, these things were signs, I suppose, of his personalities, or the way of how he, okay, in that case it was how he dealt with the situation, right? And again, I won't go into the details. You have to go and watch it on. But again, showing the way that he did it, and how he used that to catapult his own career at the death of Biggie. To me, that was just unbelievable. You know, his personality was starting to show more and more to the public, right? How he wanted to become a top dog. So, which leads to my fourth point. And when you think about it, you know, the album, No Way Out, record label calling themselves Bad Boys. Were these just all signs that he had been just taunting everyone all along? But the thing is, and throughout the documentary, as well as a lot of other footages that we probably have seen in the last 20-30 years as well, that he had always tried to, through his lyrics, to express his wickedness, or if that's the right word to describe it, right? Or his jealousy of whoever that he was not happy with, right? But to me, you know, do we as the public missed it? Probably not just some of us, but for much, I guess, a broader context, right? You know, everyone's top 40 music back in the 90s, when you think the period where that whole swag and bling that he sort of portrayed himself and his crew to take that as the way of how they do their thing, right? Again, quite disturbing, you know. And then my fifth point, Kurt Burrows. Now he's co-founder of Bad Boys. I didn't even know he existed. I mean, again, I wasn't that deep into the background of everyone. And again, back then, internet was just starting, right? So I wasn't gonna go in and find out who's the co-founder and all that shit. Like, Puff was the face of the whole Bad Boys label and persona and everything, right? Now, to hear Kurt talked about the whole ordeal and the fact that, he was only getting the 25% shares of the company and eventually got nothing out of it. Makes you think, how he treats friends and associates, obviously not very well. I would have thought, if you're a boss of a company, big or small, or not big or small, big or small, don't care, right? Your role is to really take charge and also take the music and whatever else that he was into to the next level, right? But he seems to be always having this personal vendetta over anyone else that was not on his side. And to me, that's very dangerous, to people and to the public and to anyone that has actually worked with him, right? Right, and then, okay, point 6, very important. Pay those people who actually did the work for you. Now, obviously, 50 got the footage of the guy that was the videographer that was shooting Diddy just before he got arrested, right? So, and apparently, he, because Puff did not pay him, the videographer. So, karma, obviously thinking about why would you be having someone following you around when you're about to be caught, And to me, again, ego, right? And also he wanted this footage to, I guess, somehow as his redemption. Obviously, it didn't turn out that way, right? But it just really makes you think about the personality that he is and how he just doesn't really give a shit about anything but himself, right? Sometimes when you think in the corporate world, like in the business world, we've seen people like that. I'm not going to name who and what company, but we've seen in a business environment there are those egocentric that are at the top, and he or she believes that they are above everyone else, and then treat their own people like dirt shit, man. To me, it's unforgivable. Why would I want to work for you if you're like that? In this scenario, he didn't pay the guy apparently, right? So what gives, and he knows 50 was
right. It's me being uncomfortable
trying to get hold of anything as much as he could to push this out there, right? Next point, love, hate, and jealousy. Now, it seems to be a constant of all that going on in his life, right? And to me, wouldn't you find that exhausting? If you're always treating people like that, the way that he was, and at the same time you're always trying to find ways to get forgiveness because of the bad shit that you've done. It's like a vicious circle, right? Why would you complicate your own life like that? No, it doesn't make sense. Or again, everyone's have their own different personalities, right? But the extreme that he went to get back at people or trying to belittle people, I think it's totally wrong. Again, we've seen that in the corporate world. Now next, Ja Rule and Marlon Wayans. Now, as we all learned, not just this time, but for years, you don't mess with 50 Cent. Why would you go out and start saying what they said soon after the documentaries came out? And I'm like, come on guys, you guys are not day one in the showbiz. You guys are not day one of knowing who you're talking to, right? Yeah, so why would you put yourselves into the microphone or even when you talk about it to make it sounding like that you're siding with Pop. It's weird. Were they wanting attention? 50 has done what he's done, right? It'll be interesting to see when Puff comes out in 4 years' time, or 4 years and 2 months' time. Now, which brings to the next point: storytelling, narrative, and facts. This is somewhat, the way of how the 4 episodes were put together. I think it was done in a masterful way, right? It's just very thoughtful, I think. And obviously the thoughtfulness, as well as the actual footages of what he got hold of from all the different situations, scenarios and whatnot, and being able to tell it the way that he did, or his crew did, in what he's done for this series, right? But and the thing is that there has been many documentaries, for one, about Pac and Biggie's situation, right? Many series, documentaries, public investigation reports and shit, stuff like that. But nothing like, I highlighted episode 2 because in that hour it was really just, we saw a few more layers deeper than what we've seen in the past from all the other documentaries that we've seen about that situation, right? And then again, it still remains unsolved somehow. What the heck, Last but not least, it's just when you think about the whole Puff, Diddy, Bad Boys situation, and the whole package of what we've seen in the last 30 years, just one big ass act. Now, if he has been living like this for this long and for that much stories and controversy, one big act like this, so many moves over the years that has led him to where he's now, makes you think about life. Life shouldn't be like that. We should be. It's very hard to swallow the fact that you've got your followers and your haters, right? But there are facts in this series where factual, like whether you were willingly to participate or unwillingly been dragged into participate, regardless, it's the accumulations of many things, right? It's not just one incident here or one incident there. It's almost like you can be successful, but you shouldn't have to do it the way that he did, right? And also you can have ego, but then you shouldn't have done the thing that he's done. So I don't know. I mean, how does he sleep at night? But to actually think of the seriousness of the situation, it just makes it very, very difficult to watch overall, right? But obviously this series is not the end of the story by far, right? Who knows what's going to happen in the next God knows what. But as someone who enjoys and loves hip-hop music and culture, I don't wish things like this happens again, and it talks about it's really about the toxicness of how things can go really wrong if your mind's not right. So to create a legacy with all these stuff that went on behind the scene, it's not right, and you're hurting people, and that's the part that's so crazy about the whole situation, right? Anyway, it's not an easy episode to do because, like I said, I have never lived in America. So I was just as a spectator or a listener living afar in Australia back in the 90s, and makes you wonder. The golden age of hip-hop has a lot of really positive and great things, but this was definitely not one of it. Until next episode, peace.